Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today, in addition to the read aloud that I posted of the Mortal Instruments City of Fallen Angels that I posted today, I am posting an addition to this channel that I'm actually kind of weary of sharing with you guys, but I ultimately decided that it would be best to do this as I move into trying to get a book published, because as you guys know, I've been working on several rough drafts for a book that I am currently writing, and this is an idea that popped into my mind as I was reading not just the Mortal Instruments, but I also thought of like Percy Jackson and the Olympians, as well as shows such as Warehouse 13, stuff like The Librarians, things like that. And it all sort of culminated into this project that I've been working on for the past few months over the summer, and I am considering sending to agencies to hopefully work on getting it published, but I want to show that it can garner some kind of an audience first before I go sending it out there to agencies and the public and trying to make money off of it. So today this is going to be a little sneak peek, a little preview of my book, which I call The Archivists and the Twin Arrows, and this is Chapter 1, The Elixir. You ready, sis? Sienna Shannon glanced apprehensively toward the small, circular stage and swallowed down the nerves that left her high all day. Since early that morning, she felt as though she'd had 5 espresso shots. Her stomach twisted into a giant knot. Her fingers gently trembled like the fluttering wings of a bird, and her heart beat fiercely against her rib cage and threatened to burst. But with the nerves came that hint of excitement as she turned her gaze toward her twin brother, Eli, who was grinning at her widely, his blue-green eyes alight with eagerness behind his black, square-framed glasses. The Elixir Pub, the all-ages, fantasy-themed bar on Waverly Place, was particularly packed for a Friday night. Despite the police's warnings about mysterious kidnappings that occurred late at night, nothing seemed to stop the locals from going out and participating in the early Halloween festivities. Neighborhood kids from Greenwich Prep were gathered around the bar top, sipping pomegranate, apple, pumpkin, and blackberry mocktails, and eating a wide variety of chicken wings, personal pizzas, sandwiches, and salads. Almost everybody was dressed in Halloween costumes, but those who went to the Elixir Pub needed little excuse to dress up. It was practically common for people to come in full costume all year round, especially in the fall, winter, and summer seasons, as the pub prepared to celebrate Halloween, Christmas, the winter solstice, and the summer solstice. Still, Halloween was the most popular holiday celebrated because most neighborhood teenagers preferred partying at the Elixir rather than going trick-or-treating. 17-year-olds with dyed blue or pink tips to their hair, wearing vampire fangs, medieval armor, fairy wings, and Renaissance-era dresses mingled in the plush, purple velvet booths surrounding the dining room. Somebody stood in the far corner near the bar, dressed like a wizard, and passed out free shots of Irish whiskey. Those 21 and older wore tattered jeans and vintage t-shirts paired with brightly colored cloaks and sipped the colorful molecular cocktails that smoked, fizzed, and popped. The energy of the drinks matched the pulsing vibrancy of the bar, which was decorated with mythical animal taxidermy, gigantic bright orange, green, yellow, and red mushrooms planted on the hardwood floor, glowing jack-o'-lanterns, skeletons, fuzzy, black, dangling bats that suspended from the ceiling, bands of gold that surrounded the stained glass window frames, and old weathered wood that was distressed with age. The moonlight that danced through the stained glass reflected the blues, greens, purples, oranges, and reds, and created ethereal patterns across the floor. The small, wooden, circular stage, which beckoned Sienna and her friends forward, was draped in colorful fairy lights and fog from the smoke machines, which curled along the ground in soft twists and twirls, taking on colors of lavender, sapphire, lime green, and pale gold. Seeing her brother's enthusiastic expression filled her with courage as the nervousness melted away. "You know I am." Eli's smile widened even more as he reached for a slice of his pizza, barbecued chicken with smoked cheddar drizzled in ranch dressing. Over on the stage, their friends Caleb, Jesse, and Tyson were setting up the band's equipment. Caleb was tuning up his bass guitar. He strummed his fingers along the strings and tested the tightness before moving on to Eli's electric guitar to give it the same tune-up. Jessie ran her fingers along the keys of her keyboard, going up and down the scale. Tyson tapped at his drums a few times with his sticks. Sienna and Eli Shannon's band, Atomic Wildfire, was formed at the end of their junior year with Caleb and Jesse, and somehow Tyson Harrison, Jesse's neighbor, got roped in. It had been Tyson's idea for the band's name, and Sienna and Eli made sure to tell everyone at school that they didn't pick the title. If they did, they would have thought of something better than a reference to the Canadian wildfires that happened over the summer. They were happy that the whole summer practicing finally paid off, because Caleb struck a deal with the owner of the Elixir Pub for them to perform a gig that night, which kicked off their birthday weekend. The Elixir Pub had been their go-to hangout spot since it opened 5 years ago. Sienna wasn't quite sure why she liked it so much, but she figured it was because the environment looked far from ordinary, and the kids who went to their artsy prep school frequented the pub, loving the free-spirited climate, which made them feel like they were stepping into a fairy tale. It was a place you went to when you wanted to escape reality, and that was easy when the environment looked ripped right out of a scene from The Lord of the Rings. Jessie stepped down from the stage, her amber-specked brown eyes bright. Jessie was stunningly beautiful in ways that made Sienna feel a little jealous. She was taller, with a Middle Eastern tan and shiny black Jewish curls, a far cry from Sienna's ginger hair and cream-colored complexion. For the evening, Jessie was dressed as a belly dancer, wearing a long red skirt and a matching bralette top accented with gold, which made her ample cleavage stand out more. She grinned at the twins before reaching for her Shirley Temple, a sizable goblet of the pomegranate and lemon-lime liquor-free beverage fizzing and smoking from the dried ice, and raised her glass as Caleb and Tyson came up behind her. They followed suit with their mocktails, and Sienna and Eli held their drinks up, Sienna's being a bright orange-colored beverage fizzing with a white cinnamon-flavored foam over it called pumpkin punch, and Eli's a glass filled with inky black licorice and sour cherry-flavored liquid called the Black Widow. Here's to our first gig, and Sienna and Eli Shannon's 18th birthday weekend. L'chaim! L'chaim! Sienna sipped her pumpkin spice mocktail, the comforting taste warming her insides as she downed it. "Let's do this, guys!" Caleb flashed one of his brilliant smiles before he grabbed Sienna's hand and pulled her to her feet. He draped his arm around her shoulders as he led her to the stage before the microphone. Sienna gripped the mic stand in her sweaty palms before tapping the microphone several times to test it. Hello everyone. My name is Sienna Shannon, and I'm here tonight with Atomic Wildfire. This one is for everyone from Greenwich Prep." The crowd applauded, cheering as she nodded for Tyson to kick in with the drums. Her brother's cue to begin the riff on his electric guitar. Sienna opened her mouth and sang as she nodded to the beat of their opening song, the rhythm of Tyson's drums and Caleb's bass thumping against the stage. And as she sang, she allowed the words her brothers wrote for her to pulse out of her throat, her vocal cords ringing soulfully as the microphone amplified her delicate alto, giving her a power that she never knew she had before. Outside, Waverly Place bustled. Crowds rushed along, trying to flag down taxis, and cars and cabs were stuck in the overflowing traffic. If someone were looking at it from above, they'd think that the streets were overcrowded with insects swarming the pavement. The roads were so condensed that you could hardly walk through them without bumping into someone's shoulder. Horns honked raucously. Cyclists pedaled along the streets and uneven sidewalks, and vendors handed out steaming sausages and hot dogs. Tourists took selfies and walked in and out of the village's various restaurants and shops. The air smelled of autumn breeze, hot dog water, cigarette ash, sizzling burgers from the local restaurants, and coffee and tea from the small cafes on almost every corner. But the Nielsen siblings and Wes Gray had other things on their minds than the cold mid-October night or the people inside the Elixir. They focused more on what was inside the pub. precisely one individual. Lydia Nielsen strode ahead of the two boys, her little brother and their cousin. For the night, she wore an outfit that looked like a Halloween costume. Chunky black heels, paired with black knee-high socks, a short black dress, fuzzy black cat ears, a stick-on cat tail, a black bow tie, and face paint that made her look like she had whiskers. Her lips were painted a brilliant fluorescent pink, and her violet eyes were lined with winged eyeliner, making them look even more cat-like. Even the fluidity of her graceful sauntering matched her costume, and she looked like she was walking the runway of a fashion show. The only thing that didn't go with the rest of her attire, but was the essential part of any mission, was the 12-carat rose gold pendant around her neck, containing an amethyst crystal in the heart of it. It was crucial, because it was the only thing that kept her hidden from human eyes. It was a kind of precaution that they were taking more than ever, especially with the strange kidnappings happening amongst not just the humans, but also their kind. As she stood outside the glass window panes of the pub, Lydia observed the kids inside the elixir. None of them exercised any precaution, as though they were ignorant that more people were going missing daily. Despite being outside the most popular teen hangout in Greenwich Village, Lydia stressed that they weren't there to have fun and had a job to do. She'd told her brother and cousin that the barkeep was expecting her because she'd insured it from her last visit. From her choice of words, neither Wes nor his cousin wanted to imagine what Lydia had told the bartender. She didn't look it, but Lydia could be scary when she wanted to be. Behind her, Wes and Gabriel were the only two who looked out of place in the pub, wearing simple dark jeans and sweaters. They looked less like they would hang out in a fantastical forest, and more like they would sit in the New York Public Library and read. All three wore black leather holsters containing their weapons: Lydia's sword, Gabriel's staff, and Wes's dagger. Lydia, was it necessary to be in full costume? Gabriel asked her cagily, twisting the bronze ring around his finger as they approached the front doors. It's the elixir, little bro. Everyone dresses up this time of year. You two are the only ones here who stick out. But nobody can see us anyway. Why does it matter? Wes questioned. It helps to blend in, whether we're glamored or not. Lydia pushed the door of the bar open, and the swirling, colorful lights bounced off her ashen hair and made it take on varying shades of blue, pink, green, and yellow. As they entered, Wes and Gabriel looked around at the various teenagers and young adults dressed in costumes before they glanced down at their plain street clothes, which weren't even accented with brightly colored cloaks. Nobody noticed they were there, but still. The boys felt their faces flush self-consciously. I told you, Lydia told them airily. Yeah, thanks. You're always right. Gabriel glowered at her furiously. Because I'm the oldest, that's why. And because you're a girl. Gabriel cast her a wry smile, and Lydia turned around to elbow him in the stomach, only for her brother to reach out to ruffle her hair, which she quickly ducked away from. Guys, please, Wes said, shaking his head at the sibling banter between his cousins. Lydia, are you sure your friend will talk? Bran isn't a friend, but he can provide information. Let me do the talking, ordered Lydia, her voice sharp. They weaved through the crowd of costume-clad teens and those 21 and older. One young couple sloppily made out in the far corner of the bar. Their bodies were pressed closely together as they melded into one singular being. A young man in leather-clad pants was commissioning for graphic art in one of the booths near the stage, but their eyes were set on the bar manager, who shook martinis and collected tips from the customers, looking less than human. Not that any other customers would notice. All right, but if he tries anything... Gabriel's voice trailed off and got lower, almost growling. His green eyes turned as hard as emeralds as his shoulders hunched inward protectively. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. Lydia turned her deep blue eyes toward her brother's green, and Gabriel saw the dangerous glint that flashed under the multicolored light show. But as they approached the bar, Wes's ears picked up on an alto that could have belonged to an angel, and he turned his dark brown eyes toward the stage near the back of the dining room. The person singing on stage was a girl who looked about his age. He'd been to the Elixir pub once or twice, yet he'd never seen the girl before. She was tiny, small enough to be a half-elf. Her fiery red hair cascaded down her shoulders and swayed with her body as she sang into the microphone. The leopard-patterned, horn-rimmed glasses, which sat on the bridge of her nose, reflected all the colors of the stage lights, and the fog that swirled around her made her look as though she had wings behind her back. Her voice, delicate as it may be, rang out powerfully and seemed to put the entire room under a spell. Everyone in the audience had their attention on her, and it was hard not to pay attention to her. Her voice invited you to stand there and listen as she sang, and it was sweeter than the finest honey in the world. It made him wonder if she was part siren. Wes's feet remained glued to the floor, and for a moment he forgot how to make his limbs work as he watched the girls sing the song's final note, and the audience burst into loud applause. He was only brought out of his reverie by Gabriel grabbing his arm. "Wes, let's go." Gabriel's grip remained firm as he dragged his cousin over to the bar, where Lydia had already ordered an espresso martini, her favorite drink, and was speaking to the bar manager, Bran, as she sat on one of the high stools around the bar top, her legs crossed over one another. Most humans couldn't see Bran for what he was, but on the surface, he didn't look intimidating, standing at 5'1" and needing a step stool to see above the bar. Being a dark fairy, he knew how to use glamour to fool everyone into thinking he was human, but those who could see him and knew his species could tell he was far from human. Once someone saw past the glamour, they noticed his dark blue skin, his long white hair, his pointed fairy ears, the long black razor-sharp fingernails, and the startling blood-red irises, as well as the black butterfly-like wings that protruded from his back through the black leather jacket he wore over his bare, chiseled chest, which was covered in what looked like scars, but they weren't scars. They were marks. Swirls coiled across his skin in a dizzying pattern and distinctly made him stand out from other kinds of fairies. "Fancy a drink, gentlemen?" Bran briskly asked. His tone held a falsified friendliness, making it clear he wasn't thrilled that Lydia was there, much less her brother and cousin. Wes wondered what his cousin had said or done to piss the barkeep off so badly. Bran looked as though someone had lit a match underneath him, but then he remembered Lydia telling him that Bran needed very little reason to be in a bad mood, and that if they were going to get his help, he needed to be convinced. However, Wes wasn't sure he wanted to know how Lydia would persuade him as he watched his eldest cousin sip her martini, the fluorescent pink lipstick staining the edge of the glass, rimmed with vanilla sugar and crushed espresso beans. "They're not here to drink. They're underage," Lydia replied swiftly, her fingers delicately wrapped around the base of the martini glass as she set it down on the bar top. The wetness from the bottom of the glass was already forming a ring on the wood where it sat. "We're here because we heard you know something that could help us." "And what makes you think that?" Lydia smiled, her incandescent pink lips curling upward, but the smile was far from sweet. If one looked into her eyes, one would see the underlying unfriendliness that would chill even the most muscular man to the bone. "You have connections to the dark market. That means our kind knows. That means your kind knows what we're looking for, and you know where it is. It's someplace so deeply hidden that even our scanners cannot detect it." Bran narrowed his eyes at the blonde and looked her up and down, and his lips pressed into a paper-thin line. "Just because you and I have similar blood, my darling, that does not mean we're friends. I have my people to worry about. More of us are going missing day by day." He pointed one long, crooked finger to that day's front page of the Daily News, which was pinned up on the wall behind him. The headline read, "New York Citizens Missing." "And even if I did know what you're looking for, I wouldn't tell you where it is. I wouldn't trust it in your hands any more than I did trust it in the hands of Ash Donahue," he added with a disdainful sneer. Wes noticed Gabriel seemed to grow angrier the longer they stood there listening. Not that he could blame him in any case. Wes didn't like hearing Bran chastise Lydia like she was a stupid child who didn't know how to speak English. But Wes was a lot better at controlling himself than Gabriel in heated situations. He knew Gabriel was a hothead, that his being here tonight would prove challenging, but Wes secretly hoped that Gabriel would keep his mouth shut, though he wasn't sure for whose sake. I'm not mistaken. I know what this means for our world. It means we'll potentially be exposed. Do you think we want that? Lydia's lips curled over her teeth as her face seemed to be carved into stone. She lowered one of the straps on her dress to reveal a similar scar marked right on her shoulder. Albeit far different than the ones Bran was covered in, it resembled a flame, burnt red, orange, and gold, seeming to flicker underneath the dancing polychrome lights. If Bran's mark displayed the pool of darkness that flowed through his veins, Lydia's, much like Gabriel's and Wes's, spoke of a different kind of power that rushed through her, no matter how small it was. And our blood isn't that similar, she added coolly, pulling the strap of her dress back up to cover her shoulder. Yeah, scoffed Gabriel, rolling his eyes, because the one thing I hope for is to discover that we're long-lost cousins. Lydia elbowed her younger brother in the ribs fiercely before she whipped her head around to face him. Her teeth clenched, her dark blue eyes grew darker, and her hands fisted tightly. Gabriel Adam Nielsen, no! She hissed, knowing he listened to her when she called him by his full name. She turned to Bran, whose nostrils flared with rage as his ruby-red eyes narrowed into tiny slits. Sorry about him. Sometimes he talks too much. Gabriel looked like he wanted to say more as he stepped closer to his older sister protectively, but Wes leaned a hand on his arm and shot him a look. Easy. And you're okay with this? Gabriel hissed, when Wes guessed his cousin felt like retorting something along the lines of, if he talks to her like that again, I'll kick his teeth in. But Wes knew his stern glance was the only thing holding Gabriel back. I don't like it, but you've got to trust her, Wes mumbled in a voice so low Gabriel had to strain to hear, but he rolled his eyes all the same. Look, Bran, continued Lydia, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. So here's how this is going to go. You can tell us where the Holy Grail is, or... She reached into her weapon's holster and brandished what looked like an ordinary pistol. I can get creative. Your choice. Bran's dark blue skin seemed to pale to light blue as he stared at Lydia in a mixture of horror and fury. You bitch! Those two words lit a fuse in Gabriel, who summarily stepped around Lydia and Bran, and grabbed Bran by the collar of his jacket and lifted him an inch off the ground. He spat out behind a clenched jaw, Don't call my sister a bitch! A little spittle flew off his lips and landed on Bran's cheek, but he didn't care. Nothing infuriated Gabriel more than seeing someone bully his sister, regardless of their age gap. But he knew that was the wrong thing to say when Bran's red eyes seemed to glow, brightening as a burst of black smoke emerged from his fingertips. He raised his right hand and aimed it directly at Gabriel's neck, and the young man's throat constricted so tightly that it felt like someone had wrapped a plastic zip tie around his esophagus. Gabriel's eyes watered, and when he tried to breathe, he gagged, his hand weakly falling from Bran's jacket collar before he reached to remove the invisible fingers around his neck. Stop! Leave him alone! Lydia's pleading cry caused Bran to break the hold, and Gabriel clutched at his throat, coughing harshly as his knees buckled under his weight. His limbs shook. He had faced a few unpleasant creatures before, but they never touched him. Knowing that Bran could have killed him left his nerves frayed. Wes thumped him on the back worriedly. Are you okay? Do you want to go outside and get some air? Gabriel shook his head. He managed to cough. No, I'm not leaving. Wes shook his head in exasperation. Gabriel was nothing if not stubborn, but he also couldn't blame his cousin. He hated seeing Lydia talked down to, especially by the dark fairy that tended to the bar, but he also understood he couldn't fight Lydia's battles for her. Lydia resumed her spot in front of the boys, and she glowered at the dark fairy with a ferocity that would put a lion to shame. It caused Bran to flinch, something neither Gabriel nor Wes thought was possible. You can call me whatever names you want, but don't lay a hand on my baby brother. She raised her gun again and pointed it directly at him. Wes knew that gun was loaded with silver bullets, something that killed more than just werewolves. Silver was just as effective on dark fairies and elves, witches and warlocks, though nobody has seen a witch or a warlock in over 1,000 years. But before Lydia could continue, a sudden scream cut through the air, halting them where they stood. Oh my God! Okay, so that was part of chapter 1, the elixir. So I hope you guys all enjoyed that reading of the beginning of the very first chapter in my book. And if you guys enjoyed it, you can leave a like on the video and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And also, I have to put a warning out there that this book is my thoughts, my ideas. Every single inch of this book is my thought and my idea, so do not copy this over onto someplace else. Do not take it as your own idea at all whatsoever, because that is violating copyright laws and restrictions, and please just do not do anything like that, especially since this is my work and something that I personally have ownership over. Even though it's not published yet, it is still my thoughts, my ideas, my work that I worked very hard on, and I cannot have anybody stealing anything, especially since that is copyright infringement. So God bless, happy viewing, and have a nice day, everyone. See ya!